Okay, I've decided to carry on working on the ears because they'll be separated by a gap there, so I can work on them, and that little gap will act as a buffer so that it won't run into this part of the face which is a bit wet. So once more I'm going to wet the whole of the ear shape with clear water, just gliding it on using, you know, the side of the brush rather than the tip, because the side of the brush, you know, has less tendency to disturb the washes underneath. Just wet that area there. Okay, now into this I'm going to drop a nice excuse me, rich mix of the ear colour. Just a minute there. For this I'm going to use a flat brush now. So I feel like the flat brush will give me a bit more ability to sort of shape and carve as I go along. So I've got a 1/2 inch flat brush now. So let's pick up that same colour. So it's raw umber, burnt umber, and a little bit of French ultramarine blue. Okay, so I'm going to drop this colour in. Where we've got those highlights, I'm going to skim around those, and I'll lift them out again, you know, because I liked those highlights. Right. To make that highlight, you know, sort of still visible, I'm going to gently use a slightly moist size 3 brush and just coax the brown colour up a little bit, but not too deeply, so that we've still got some contrast, light going to dark. Okay. Then as I'm looking at the ear, you can see that that's much darker, that's much lighter, and it's quite orangey, but that's, you know, that's the lighting on the actual photograph. The dog's colouring is more that way, so that's definitely darker in there. There's a lighter patch. So let's get a much darker patch in there before we do anything. That'll really give the ear some shape then, so much more French ultramarine blue, because it's almost a black brown in there, isn't it? So French ultramarine blue mixed with that brown on my palette, and let's put that in. In fact, it can go much darker than that, so much more blue again. And let's have some burnt umber, some more blue. And mix it really well so that you don't have any streaks of blue popping up when you don't want it. So that dark is really in there. And it goes to that sort of a shape. And then there's a dark quality to the tip of his ear. It sort of goes to that lovely charcoal brown black, and then it gradually gets, you know, into the brown colour. So I'm going to pick that up now and let that all have a run and a bleed. I feel it's not going to bleed as much as I'd like, so what I can do to help that is come along with a moist size 3 brush and just coax it a little bit in this vertical position. So that's helping it get a bit more of a gradual bleed, and same with the big dark mark I made there. That'll bleed more softly then. Alright, so let's lay it flat and see how that's looking now. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is wipe out a highlight. Here, bit of a highlight. Actually, there's one there. So press that thirsty 1/2-inch brush in there. So I've got a nice little V coming down there. Then reshape my brush, and there's definitely a highlight there. Lift my brush away carefully. Now that's a little bit, you know, too white. So I'll go back in with a size 3 moist brush, which is a little bit of the brown on that you can see there, and I'll just soften it in just a tad. All I want is to get this velvety feeling in the dog's ear. Okay, there's a little bit of a tiny speck of Winsor, of burnt sienna mixed in with that brown. I'm going to add just a bit of warmth in there. It's not very noticeable, it's just a little bit of warmth in that fold and there. Now that ear is drying nicely. Excuse me, got a bit of a cough. So before I leave it alone, I'm just going to see what else might need a bit of blending. Yeah, so that feeling of, yeah, just a little bit more up there. Okay. Okay, and I think I'm just going to leave it at that and let it dry. So moving on to the other side, again we'll wet the ear with clear water. Right, now, so we're going to have, this is a big brush, but it can be very fine, you know, so it can be very fine for those delicate edges. And it won't disturb the wash underneath. And as you can see in this year, you know, we are still letting some of the previous wash show through. So it does give a bit of depth to your painting, you know. And I'm looking, I'm tilting my head all the time to see that I haven't left any parts unwetted, and I've missed quite a bit of the right hand side of the ear, so must get that moistened as well. I'm using the tip now, I shouldn't really, but as I say, I can't turn my board. If I was turning my board without being on camera, I could use the flat of my brush a lot more easily, but I'm trying to paint at a difficult angle now. So, okay, so let's show you that ear now. The moisture in there, can you see that now? So that ear is all moist. There we are. That's the moisture I want. And now I'll do the same thing. I'm going to drop in a stronger brown colour. So let's get our main colour, this tan buff colour, which is raw umber, burnt umber, raw umber and burnt umber. and a little tiny speck of Ultramarine Blue. Bit more. I add tiny increments of the blue because it can quite soon go to the black, which is a bit too dark for this stage of the ear. We need black at the end, but not now. So I'm stroking this colour on. Right, so into that, as I'm looking now, that's much darker, isn't it? There's a dark sort of fold in there. Then it's a bit lighter that side and a bit lighter this side. But that is lighter than this, and this is lighter than that. So, and this is a light rim. So I'm always looking, you know, comparing light against dark. That part of the fur is a bit lighter than that fold in there. And again, you know, we can, in art, it's just, we're trying to paint something using our feelings, and a part of ourself always comes into the painting. So you'll only get a you'll get an approximation to something. And I think that's what most people want. They don't want it to look, you know, like you've taken a photograph. There's nothing wrong with wanting that. I don't want to paint that way. I want to paint a little bit more, you know, poetically, maybe, is that the word? And so I get as close as I can to something and leave it a little bit, you know, imperfect, with a little bit left to the imagination of the viewer. Now there's a blob there, so brush it back in because it looks a little bit ugly. So then there's that sort of fold in there. It goes wide and then it goes a bit narrow. So see, I'm just placing these darks. There's a bit more of a dark in there as well. A little bit. Okay, and so that's lighter there. So I'm giving the paint a few, you know, a minute or so to settle in there before I start trying to rub it around and rub it out and lift it. Because if I try and start lifting it now, it's too moist, and it'll just seep back into the area I've lifted it out from. So while I'm waiting for it to just soak in a little bit, I'm going to dry my, I rinsed my brush. I've got it in very dry with a flannel, okay, with a terry cloth flannel. So that's ready to lift in a second. And then I'm going to, again, pick it up now and just let those passages of dark run a few millimeters. And they give a lovely, you know, bleed sort of look, which looks quite nice in watercolour. Then from side to side, just let them bleed in and fuse on a sideways angle, and then vertical again. So, you know, you can get used to throwing your board around, you know, try it and get it in this angle and that angle. Getting this nice streaky effect now, which I really like. Looks quite nice. So let's lay it flat again. What's jumping out at me now is the fold of the ear is sitting exactly on the back of the dog, and I really don't like that. It looks a little bit, feels wrong to me. So I'm going to correct that by just getting some of the basic brown colour we've used in the ear. and just try and make the ear sit a bit away, you know, even, yeah, there we are, just a little bit away from the, so that fold looks a little bit more natural there. That's better. It's literally a couple of millimetres off the actual dog's body. Okay, so let's see what I'm going to lift now. So as you can see, this is all still moist. See the moisture there? See the moisture there? It's all moist. But it's had a few more, you know, seconds to sink in. So when I start lifting now, it shouldn't seep back in too much, okay? Right, so there's definitely a highlight here. So as you can see, I'm using my brush. I'm pirouetting it. It starts off narrow, then it gets fatter, then it gets thinner. There's a highlight there. Much lighter. There. Then there's a highlight on the rim. There. And there's a little bit of a highlight there as well. Okay, I'm just keeping an eye on it to see if anything's going to seep back in like it sometimes does. This is seeping in a bit, but it's a nice soft one. And don't forget, this ear is in shadow, so I'm not bothered if overall it looks, you know, a bit less defined. Okay, so I think I'm just going to leave that to dry now. That needs to come off there a bit. It's worth staying with your painting for a few minutes because things can disappear, you know, highlights you've done can disappear. Right. So I'm going to leave that now. This is how he's looking at the moment. Okay. As you can see, there's still quite a bit of moisture in both those ears, alright? So let's just give them their time. Let's leave them alone now for an hour or so and come back and see how things are looking, because the darks will have lightened a lot more and everything. Okay, see you in the next clip.